Hi guys, I'm Johnny from The PE Tutor. Thanks for taking your time to watch today's mini lesson. It's actually from a series that we've just finished putting together for all of our Level 2 BTEC sports students. So if you are studying for that Unit 1 exam, or you're a teacher and you have your own students preparing for that exam, then please do subscribe to this channel, and you can use all of our mini lessons uploaded here on YouTube, or click on the link below. We've actually just finished putting together a free flashcard pack for all students and teachers alike to use to really help you prepare for that exam. Anyway, hope you enjoy the lesson, and I'll see you again soon. So in today's mini lesson, we're going to be looking at the principles of training. Now what these are factors or considerations that performers or coaches need to make when designing and implementing a training regime. And we can split these principles of training into two main categories. We have a broader category, which I like to call the FITT principles, and then we have a more specific category, which I like to refer to as the SPORVIA principles. So what we're going to do is go through each principle in turn, saying what it is, to then explain why it's important, like you will have to do in your exam, and then give an example of it in practice. So to start with, we're going to look at the FITT principle. Now, the FITT, that stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type. Frequency. This is how often we train. Frequency is an important factor for a performer or coach to be considering, because if we are training too regularly, that could lead to injury or overuse of certain muscles and joints. Another factor to consider is that if we are training too regularly, a performer might become bored with the certain regime that they are following. And as soon as boredom starts to set in, motivation starts to drop, effort levels start to drop, and training won't be as effective as it could be. An example of frequency in someone's training regime could be that a performer decides to weight train Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays, and they take Tuesdays and Thursdays off, and on Saturday and Sunday they leave available for performance. In this example, the frequency of this performer's training is 3 out of the 7 days of the week. The second principle in the FITT category is intensity. Intensity is the level of effort or how hard the performer is training. Now, intensity comes in lots of different shapes and sizes. The easiest way for a performer or a coach to measure the intensity of their training is to compare whatever activity they're doing to their 100% effort in that same activity. Intensity is an important principle for a performer or a coach to consider, because it can vary greatly, and working in different intensity zones can cause different benefits and changes to occur in a performer's body and their fitness. And at an elite level, a performer needs to be making sure that the intensity in their training sessions is similar to or matching the intensity that they're going to be experiencing in competitive situations. So an example of intensity in training could be a sprinter who is conducting weight training sessions. If they were to be completing weighted squats, they could look at their 100% or their 1 repetition max and then compare that to what they're currently lifting. If they want to be increasing their power, then they want to be working close to that 100% figure and lifting the weight for a few repetitions. However, if we take a 1500 meter runner and they were wanting to be developing their muscular endurance, they'd take their 100% figure, but they'd only be lifting between 60 and 80% of that weight, but for more repetitions. By altering the intensity of a training session, we can alter the effects or the benefits to a performer's fitness. Our next component of fitness in the FITT category is time. Time, nice and simple, refers to the length of sessions, the length of work periods, and the length of rest periods. Time is an important principle for a performer or coach to be considering, because when tracked over a period of weeks and months, a performer can start, or a coach can start, to tweak the training regime to make it slightly harder or slightly easier depending on their current results. For example, if a performer is completing circuit training with 6 stations in their workout, they can increase the level of work or the level of effort or the intensity of their training session by increasing the length of time they spend on a station and decreasing the length of time they have to rest between each station. Over time, the performer can then see how much they've got better. And the final principle in the FITT category is type. There's a range of training types. What a performer or a coach needs to do is make sure that the ones that they select to include in their training regime are relevant. And what I mean by relevant is that they match up to the competitive situation that the performer is training for. A performer may also consider the type of training that they include in order to combat boredom or tedium. Completing the same type of training over and over again is not only going to limit the components of fitness that are being improved, but it could also play on the performer's mindset and decrease their motivation. An example of this could be a rower. Instead of just performing continuous training on a rowing machine, they might switch that up and perform continuous training on a bike. They might go out for a run. They're still targeting the same components of fitness, but because they've altered the type of training, they're going to be experiencing slightly different benefits. In that same example though, a rower will not want to be doing just continuous training. Parts of their sport will demand power and speed from them as well. So their training regime should match this, and they should be including things like weight training, plyometric training, speed training. So our second category of principles of training is the SPORVIA category. SPORVIA stands for specificity, progressive overload, rest, recovery, reversibility, variance, individual needs, and adaptation. Specificity is the concept that a performer or coach needs to make a training session as bespoke to their needs as possible. It's important for training to be made specific to a performer so that they can be as effective as possible both in training time to see the benefits that they require in their competitive situation. So if we take the example of a footballer, we could have a defender, a midfielder, a striker, a goalkeeper. All four of these performers are going to have slightly different needs in training, and their regime or their schedule should reflect this. So a striker, who's more likely to be sprinting for a ball, chasing down players, they're more likely to require sprint and speed training during their sessions as opposed to a goalkeeper, who needs more reaction and balance training. Our second principle within the SPORVIA category is progressive overload. This is the idea that training is only effective if we keep on turning up the difficulty or the intensity of training to keep on seeing those results and benefits. Our body is very good at adapting to new stresses placed onto it. So each time we perform something in training which places stress on our body, it finds a way to get better, to improve, so that if it comes across that same stress again, it's able to cope with it far better. So if we take a sprinter, for example, who keeps on squatting the same weight on the rack every single time, their body's going to reach a plateau because their body's going to improve to the extent that it can lift that weight, but no more. So to incorporate progressive overload means to keep on ramping up the difficulty ever so slightly each time we see improvements occur. By gradually making training harder, we gradually become better to cope with those slightly increasing demands. The next two principles are closely linked: rest and recovery. We need to allow time for our body to rest in order for it to recover and be ready for the next training session. If we ignore these principles, our body could become damaged over a sustained period of time. Physiologically, our muscles and our joints, they could become strained or damaged, which could affect our performance in a competitive situation. Psychologically, if we don't allow ourselves time to step away from training, it can become very repetitive, very monotonous, and that could affect motivation and drive to continue. An example of incorporating rest and recovery could be an elite athlete who takes the day off after they've just performed competitively. Our next principle of training in the SPORVIA category is reversibility. This is the idea of use it or lose it. If we don't train regularly enough, or hard enough, or overload ourselves progressively enough, then our components of fitness start to reverse back to what they were before we started training. This is an important principle of training for a performer or a coach, because they need to ensure that their training regime continually gets harder and harder, and it includes enough training sessions for reversibility to be avoided completely. Otherwise, training is a waste of time. An example of this could be a performer who's just finished their season and they come into a 1 or 2 month period of lack of work. In that 1 or 2 month period, if their training drops or they don't keep up the demands that they placed on their body during the season, then they could actually see a reverse to what they were like before the season had started altogether. Our next principle, V, stands for variance. Variance is the idea that we need to use a wide range of training types, different activities, different locations within our training regime to keep ourselves interested, to keep our body on its toes to make sure that we continually progress it and make it develop how we want it to. An example of this could be that for 2 weeks we might train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but then to mix that up we might then train Tuesday, Thursday and then maybe a day at the weekend. Another example could be a performer who's weight training Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They then switch this up to then do plyometric training of a similar intensity on those same days to keep their body on its toes to make sure that it's still progressing and their motivation isn't affected. Our second to last principle, I, stands for individual needs. Individual needs is an important principle for a performer or coach to consider because every single athlete, be it novice, be it expert, is different. Training needs to fit around their current lifestyle, be it work, be it education, be it childcare. An effective training regime incorporates all of that and makes training possible. It also needs to incorporate a performer's goals. If the training sessions don't match up with what they want at the end or their end goal, then they're not going to want to turn up to training to put in the effort to see those results because they don't want them. So it's very important for a coach to sit down with the performer, assess what they want out of training, to then design a series of sessions, a series of workouts that will get them to where they want to be. If that want or desire isn't there, the performer isn't going to apply themselves maximally and get what they need to out of those training sessions. An example of this could be a novice performer who just wants to get into slightly better shape, getting put onto an elite training regime where they're expected to be up for 2 hours every morning between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. before work, putting in 100% effort at high intensity levels to see that rapid progression. That's going to turn them off training altogether. Instead, what that performer would benefit more from would be a gradual introduction to training that starts off at lower intensity, a few days a week at a time that suits them. And finally, we have adaptation within the Sporvia category. Adaptation is the concept that a training regime isn't set in stone. As a performer does improve or regress in certain areas, the training regime needs to match that. Both the performer and the coach need to be bearing in mind that they might need to tweak certain aspects of that training regime for it to better suit the performer as they progress. For example, if a performer picks up a slight injury or a knock during a competitive situation, the training regime should be adapted to make sure that they're not causing any more damage to occur, and in fact, there is that period of rest and recovery built into the regime for whichever part of their body was injured. At the same time, they might decide to increase the level or quality of training in a different area to focus on something completely different to what's injured. In doing so, training is still effective, they're still seeing progress happen, but they're also allowing time for rest and recovery. It could also be that their goals changed. Something might happen during the season, which means that they have to focus on a particular area to improve that to stand a better chance of reaching their goal. So, to sum up the principles of training, we have two categories, the FITT category and the Sporvia category. FITT standing for frequency, intensity, time and type, and Sporvia category standing for specificity, progressive overload, rest, recovery, reversibility, variance, individual needs, and adaptations. I hope you found today's mini lesson useful. If you did, hit subscribe and we'll keep you updated with all the videos coming to you onto our YouTube channel for the BTEC Sport Unit 1 exam. See you again soon.